Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost in Agreement. Almost in Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostinagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Welcome to Compass Points, the podcast that we put out every week that covers government, politics, business, education, and any other news in Knoxville and Knox County, Tennessee that strikes our fancy. And my name is Scott Barker. I am co-founder, co-publisher, co-editor, and reporter at Compass. I'm usually joined by Jesse Fox Mayshark, who is also all of the above for Compass. And however, Jesse is traveling to be with his family, a noble endeavor indeed. And so you are stuck with me flying solo, although I am joined here by Seth Barber, who is our producer and chief instigator at Barbarian Productions. How you doing, Seth?
I think I'll take that as a compliment. I'm not sure.
Well, I think you should.
I like to pick a fight here or there. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we had a kind of a strange week this week, and we will go through kind of a review of the big news out of Knox County and Knoxville. First off, as we always do, first we will, among the things we'll talk about, Knoxville Knox County Planning Commission had a meeting this week, and they took on a wedding venue in a very strange after the fact approval process for them, and they also addressed some of the missing middle housing we talked about. The school board had two meetings this week. They had a work session and a voting session. They talked about what is known as religious instruction or release time. That is where students are allowed to go off campus to attend religious classes. Something that is allowed by state law, is allowed by the U.S. Constitution, and we'll talk about what the school board did on that this week. We'll also talk about campaign contributions in city council races. This week was the deadline for the second quarter campaign finance reports, and we can run down most of the numbers. Won't probably get to all of the numbers, but most of the numbers involved in that, as we're heading into the final. We're in the final 2 months of the election. At least the primary election. The general election will be in November. But we'll start off talking about one of the things that the school board talked about this week but didn't actually vote on, and that was the frequency of their meetings. School board meets twice a month, actually twice a week, and they met Monday in a work session to discuss the things that were going to be on the agenda for the voting meeting, which was held on Thursday. And Steve Triplett, who is a first-term school board member, had floated the idea of doing away with the work session. So that is the meeting where they talk about the upcoming items on the agenda for the voting meeting. They kind of hash out, share information in public, and get information from staff, the public can talk about it. It's just a very, a pre-meeting meeting essentially. Triplet's concern is that a lot of times when it gets to the voting meeting on Thursdays, the discussion is redundant, and a lot of times just gets the same arguments get rehashed and that sort of thing. He wanted to do away with the work session and just have the voting meeting. That didn't get any real support from other members of the school board. The Susan Horn, Jennifer Owen, Daniel Watson, they all kind of talked about the value of being able to talk about issues before they actually had to vote on it, and being able to get information from staff and digest it and hear from the public and digest that before they actually vote. And it kind of got me thinking a little bit about how all of the local government entities have their meetings and what they do for that. And it's interesting in the county, the county commission also has a work session and then followed by a voting meeting, and they do the same thing. They review the agenda, talk about agenda items. Theirs is separated by a week. In fact, this Monday they have their work session for the month. But they, like the school board, they only have one voting meeting a month, and yes, sometimes the discussion is rehashed, but so far there's been no real movement there, any ideas to change that. City council, on the other hand, they meet twice a month and do not have a work session before each meeting. That has caused a little bit of consternation on parts of some council members who are concerned that they don't have enough time to get into to delve into the agenda items that are coming up, and the agenda for city council meetings comes out on the Thursday before the meeting, which happens on Tuesday. That is the amount of time they have with the detailed information about proposals that come out of the administration, especially because that's where most agenda items come from in the city government. So there hasn't been any real talk about having a pre-meeting workshop or anything. One of the most effective bodies that does this is actually a city-county combined body, and that's the Planning Commission. They have an agenda review meeting on Tuesday before a Thursday meeting, and they met this past week. And at the agenda review meeting, commissioners can go through a lot of the technical details, especially of some of the agenda items, and they can then ask staff questions. They can really get a good understanding of kind of the minutia of zoning, which is if you've ever been to a zoning commission meeting or looked into it, it can be pretty daunting. There are a lot of weeds to get into, and they also are able to figure out which items are going to be controversial and have a lot of opposition from the public. Obviously, a lot of times neighborhood groups have issues with what's going on with particular developments. They can, the non-controversial ones, they can kind of earmark for the consent agenda, which means they don't have to discuss it. They'll just vote on it, and a lot of items get put on the consent agenda because of that. It makes the voting meetings go a lot faster. And only those items that are controversial get a whole lot of discussion during the voting meetings. So, and there's been no discussion about changing it. So, that's just kind of a little overview. That's one of the things that we get to the fun of covering these things. Both this past week, Jesse got to go to both the work session and the voting meeting of the school board. It's one of those things that we keep up with a lot, and is actually can be beneficial to you folks in the public who might want to keep up with what's going on and know how, when, if there's an issue that's coming up you want to keep abreast of or weigh in on. The work sessions are a great way to do that.
So I have a little bit of a history question on this for you, Scott.
Sure.
How long have work sessions been a thing? Has it been a long-term thing, or is it something that maybe came in with the open meetings rules and stuff like that?
Well, the Open Meetings Act goes back way back, decades. They've been around as long as I've been covering government, which is over 25 years.
Because to me, as a layperson, with the sunshine laws as we understand them, which are kind of weird when you get down deep into it, but this is a chance for these school board commissioners or the county commissioner, whichever ones do this work session, to actually have a conversation about it without having to go through the little bit more wonky process as it is to announce that they want to go, like an Owen and a whoever wants to go sit down and talk over an item, and they have to do the public thing and they have to put out their notice and all that stuff. That this is a way that they can use a dedicated time to not have to have a special called, we're hanging out together time.
Yeah, and the a good example of that is last week's school board discussion about the meetings. Triplet is unable to go privately to other school board members and find out where they are, try to convince them of the wisdom of doing what it is he wants to do, and he can't do that because under the Sunshine Law you can't deliberate toward a decision outside of a public meeting. So it does, and in this case, it gave them an opportunity to discuss it. You could see the landscape was against the proposal, and they didn't even take a vote on it. They didn't even, there was not a motion to approve it even at the voting meeting. And basically, that is one way for public officials to discuss upcoming agenda items, especially controversial ones, and change them, withdraw them, postpone them, those kinds of things. That happens. It happens with regularity at Planning Commission, for example. Something will be identified during the agenda review meeting, and then a developer will ask for a postponement and for another month, in order to get their ducks in a row, or to meet with neighborhood groups that might be opposed to all or parts of the development proposal. So it can be a very good way to I wouldn't say circumvent the Open Meetings Act, but it's a way to live with it in ways that.
Right, a little bit more structured, so you don't have to go out and call, and announce that Owen and Bike are going to sit down. I think they announced one. I think they're getting together this week or next week or something like that. It gets them out of that needing to go through that process to talk to each other in a structured way that we, the public, know when it's coming. We don't have to be, really active on Facebook or one of the other places where they're making these announcements to make sure that we know when our school board people are meeting. Yeah.
The city council has an online public forum on the city's website that they use or can use. It's been accepted as as not being a violation of the Sunshine Law for them. They can go on there, start a thread about a certain idea. Have other council members weigh in on it. It's a council member only thing. I mean, the public can't.
It's public viewing.
Not public participation necessarily. But it's rarely actually taken advantage of. It is from time to time, but not really as much as you might think. And sometimes that leads to somebody proposing something at city council, the other council members don't even know about it until the Thursday night before the Tuesday meeting. They can't call up the sponsor of a resolution to find out more information about it. It also is one of those things where, these council members, represent individual districts, and if there's an issue that is affecting one particular district, they can't just call up that district's representative and say, "Hey, what's going on there? How are you? Do you support it, or are you against it? What are you hearing?" They can't do that, and so under the Sunshine Law, so they're kind of flying in the dark in some ways. They if they have their own contacts in that district, that's what they have to talk to their own contacts, as long as it's not city council member. Whereas if you had if there's a similar issue on county commission, the first district representative can talk to the 8th district representative and find out what's going on there, and with a particular road issue or zoning issue or whatever, and they can talk about that in the work session, and not have to wait until a voting session and make a split second decision. So, and but anyway, the upshot of all that is everything's remaining the same, and then. Another thing that happened this week is in the city election, we had the campaign contribution disclosures for the second quarter, which ended June 30th, and had some interesting numbers come out. This is just one of the caveats you always have to put in is dollars don't always equal votes. There are plenty of instances where candidates who did not raise as much money as their opponents end up winning elections. Mayor India Kincannon is one example. She was in a three-way. Well, actually, there were more than three candidates, but three major primary candidates in the primary election 4 years ago, and she was third in fundraising. In the leader in fundraising, led by a great margin, and that was Councilmember Marshall Stair. Kincannon ended up finishing in the top two in the primary and winning in the general election. So money isn't everything, but it is an indication of some kind of strength. It does allow candidates to get their name out, get their materials out. They can pay for more mailers, they can pay for more yard signs, they can do a lot more things on social media. There's a lot that they can do. Real quickly on some of these, the aforementioned Mayor Kincannon is running for re-election, and she is as often is the case, not always, but often is the case, the incumbent has a big advantage on fundraising. She started out the quarter. She already had over she had about $130,000. She raised $48,000. That's a lot. That's more than a lot of candidates, or more than just about every other candidate in the election has on hand. And she just raised that just in the 3 months ending June 30th. She spent a little money, but not a whole lot. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say not a whole lot. It was $33,000, but she still has $152,000 and change on hand. So she's well positioned. Her opponents don't have nearly as much left on hand for the final couple of months of the election. Jeff Tallman, who has been a big neighborhood advocate, has been he's a mortgage lender. He's been a very, very involved behind the scenes kind of guy who is making his first run for office. He only has about a little bit less than $5,800 on hand, so much less than Kincannon. Then the other two candidates, Constance Every, is a police reform advocate, has less than $200. R.C. Lawhorn is a businessman, and he is the only straggler of all the candidates in all the races. He is the only one who has yet to file his, as of Friday morning, had yet to file his disclosure forms. Last Monday was the deadline, so there's not, generally speaking, the Election Commission gives candidates a little leeway on that. They don't send out the campaign finance police the day after the deadline to harass the candidates. It's more of an encouragement to comply, and so far he is the only one who has not filed his. The council seats, at-large seat A, Lynn Fugit and Cameron Brooks are both doing well on the financial contribution end. Fugit has about $48,000 left on hand. Brooks $34,000. So it's Brooks has done a really good job as a challenger, raising the money. He's got a lot of political connections. He was former chair of the Democratic Party. He was a union organizer, so he was he's got a lot of political connections and can raise a decent amount of money. He's also loaned his campaign $11,600, so that helps on the to get that total up. The at-large seat B race, which doesn't have an incumbent, but we've got R. Bentley Marlowe's a builder and developer primarily in the Mechanicsville area, and Debbie Helsley, who ran for county mayor last year and unsuccessfully against Glenn Jacobs. Helsley had a big head start. She's got about $22,000 on hand. Marlowe didn't start raising money until May, actually, when he filed his petition to run. He was on the very last day you could do it, and he quickly raised about $14,000. He's got about $8,000 left after expenditures. So that is a race a lot of people are keeping an eye on because the incumbent Janet Testerman decided not to run, and so that is the one seat that there's an assurance that there will be a new person occupying it. One of the most interesting races is seat C. Amelia Parker is the incumbent, but in an unusual twist, she is the only one of three candidates. She is comes in third of the three candidates in fundraising. She, however, 4 years ago, trailed pretty significantly in fundraising and ended up winning her election. So it's not necessarily a death knell for her reelection effort. She's got about $6,500 on hand. Matthew Best, who runs the Change Center in East Knoxville, is also running. He raised about the same amount that Parker did last cycle and has about $8,000 left to go heading into the final stretch. But Tim Hill, who is a developer, he's the head of chairman of the Planning Commission. He's on the Sports Authority board. He's a very well connected guy who's been involved in local civic affairs for years and years and years. He has raised he's got $129,000 left over. At one point in the campaign, he actually had raised more money than Mayor Kincannon had raised. That will be a real test of seeing how money plays a role in this. Hill is able to pay for consultants. He's able to pay people to canvass, go door to door for him, that others rely on volunteers. So there's a real quantitative difference in in how the three candidates are running their campaigns, and we'll be able to find that out. The only other election that is contested is for municipal judge. It's the first time since 2003 it's been contested. Incumbent Judge John Rawson has a lead in fundraising, but the other three candidates are doing well too, and so that's one race that is it's kind of an odd duck, because of course judges don't have policy making authority, so they can't run on what they will do once they become judges, and so we'll see. That's one of where the power of the incumbency probably is going to be a big factor. Anyway, so that's the kind of the money rundown. We are getting ready to kick off our more in-depth coverage at CompassKnox.com, and coming up, we'll be having profiles of all the candidates, and hopefully that will be a help to voters who are subscribers to Compass and can access our stories, and they will be able to be more informed when they go to the voting booth. Early voting starts on the 9th of August. And one of the things I need to talk about real quickly is the League of Women Voters is coming out with some campaign forums in advance of the primary. On August 9th, there will be one. On August 1st, there will be a forum for the mayoral candidates, and on August 7th, there will be one for the council candidates. There will also be one for the judicial candidates. It's not been completely finalized yet, but it should be the 24th of this month, and we will have dates and locations and all that for those forums coming up. Jesse is going to moderate the forum for the mayoral and council candidates. I will be the moderator for the municipal judge candidates. And so that kind of winds us up on where we are in the city campaign, city election campaign.
Real quick, have you gotten any indication from candidates that they all plan to attend or don't, or because historically we don't get a ton of turnout? No,
it's kind of interesting. One candidate I didn't even mention is a candidate named Darren Worsham, who's running for seat A against Lynn Fugit and Cameron Brooks. He did file a financial disclosure, didn't raise any money, didn't spend any money. He has not returned any of our phone calls. We tried to get a hold of him because we want to include him in the candidate profiles that we'll be running and that sort of thing, and find out who he is and what he's all about. He's a complete political unknown. But we don't know anything about him, and so I don't know if he might be someone who doesn't show up. But he might. We don't know.
Right.
But I think for the most part, all the candidates will show up. There might be it'd be interesting. The mayoral debate would be, or forum would be very interesting if Constance Every is a very, very vocal critic of the mayor and the incumbent mayor Kincannon, and
getting him in the same room on the same stage.
She goes to city council meetings and speaks at public forum, and kind of uses in recent weeks, since she's announced she was going to run, she's kind of made those into campaign speeches. She's very passionate. She yells a lot. Mm-hmm. She makes accusations, and it's that dynamic would be very interesting. But who knows if I'm assuming she will show up, and she will do that. I have not talked to her about that. Lawhorn will probably be there, and I know Tallman will. So I think that the candidates will.
You do think
by and
Kincannon will
large,
come?
I do think Kincannon
Okay.
will go. I think she's, she understands the value of getting out and talking about her, what she sees as her accomplishments, and that's what she's like any other incumbent, she's running on her record, and she is. I doubt very seriously that she would skip it, but I don't know for sure. The League of Women Voters is organizing it. They're the ones who are handling it. And they have not indicated to me anyway yet who's responded to them and who hasn't, but I'm assuming since they've got the dates that they've got most of the candidates nailed down.
Gotcha. I would expect that this is when we'll start seeing the first major round of flyers and canvassing as well in the next couple of weeks. They'll start spending that money.
Yeah, they're going to be
these next couple of weeks.
They're going to be spending that money. If you have voted in city elections regularly, my guess is your mailbox is going to be full of mailers from Tim Hill and India Kincannon, who have the most money of any of the candidates, but the other candidates will be doing the same as well.
Those mailboxes aren't cheap. That's not a cheap
no
advertising format.
No, it's not, and they will be. Not there will be that people will be knocking on your doors. You're going to have strangers coming up to you and knocking on your door and asking you to vote for a candidate. Sometimes it might be the candidate themselves, but all these races are citywide. The only district primary race is in the 5th district, and it's Charles Thomas is the incumbent, and he's unopposed. So all of the So it's very difficult for people to get out and knock on doors citywide. It just is logistically difficult, especially for almost all the candidates are employed. They've got day jobs.
Right.
Some of them have day jobs they can get away from a little easier than others. But in fact, I've been talking about this with city council candidates and other people for a while now. This is one of the first times that I can recall that at least the ones who are sitting on council now, all of them have jobs. 20 years ago, there were a bunch of
retirees.
A lot of them were retirees, and they're now they're and some were own their own businesses and were able to get out. Do their own schedules and,
right.
and get out and do things, but almost everybody is has a job, and so and some of them are pretty demanding jobs. So, when Andrew Roberto's an attorney, so for every 6-minute increment he is not working for a client is a 6-minute increment that he doesn't get paid. So he's, so his time is especially during the daytime is pretty valuable, and he's got to put food on his table and pay his mortgage and everything else, just like anyone else. So, that's one of the things about these meetings that, and elections that sometimes gets lost, because unlike national races and everything else, this is, these are part-time positions. They are not lucrative for the most part. The only one's a full-time job is city mayor. The city judge is a part-time job. Probably the most lucrative part-time job in the city in the city of Knoxville, but it's a part-time job. So if there's an attorney who runs for that, and you have to be an attorney essentially to be a judge, you've got you don't have the opportunities to make as much money as you would if you just stayed in private practice and did your thing. So so all these jobs are part-time. I think the city council pays like $21,000 a year. It's not much, and so their time is very limited, and they make a lot of sacrifices to run. So as much as there will be a lot of invective thrown around to candidates, as there always is, but it is always good to remember that they are just for the most part, regular folks who work and pay taxes and send their kids to school, or did send their kids to school in the area. So, it's and democracy, especially at the local level, depends on people who are willing to step forward.
Speaking of schools, moving back to school now.
Oh, yeah.
To go out of school for a little bit of time each day for some students.
Well, yeah, that's the religious instruction release time, which is something that's actually passes constitutional muster. It's been allowed by state law for decades, and the legislature has recently mandated it, or not mandated that school systems allow this to happen. And what it is it allows students to be excused for up to one class period a day for religious instruction off campus. So if there is a program, you're allowed to, your child can leave campus, go to that program, receive religious instruction for an hour, and come back. The school board voted on this, and what they voted to do was to allow and accept credit.
Right. So the question on the table was whether or not it's a credit course, not whether or not they could do it, because that's already come down from the state. And
they could always do it, and or not always, but they could always do it, and they have, and it has been done here, and now you can get credit. They didn't put a maximum on the credit. But you need 22 credits to graduate from high school at least, and this will be an elective credit. If you get 1 credit a year, that's 4 of your credits. You could feasibly.
I mean, you could do 2 a year, right? You could do first and second.
Yeah,
semester.
well, of course, a lot of the credits that are required for graduation are mandatory, like English.
Right.
You've got to have 4 credits in English. You got to have 4 credits or several credits in math. It's been so long since I've had a child in school. I don't recall all these things.
But so, potentially, if somebody really tried to take advantage of it, they could get over a third of their total credits out.
Possibly,
It'd have to make muster through all the different required and not required. But theoretically, if a kid took it.
Yes, these would be elective credits, and if you could fill up all of your elective credits with the religious instruction, that would be possible.
Because I think it was Jennifer Owen had a post up and was talking about it, and I get where she's coming from on whether or not it's going to damage the quality of a degree in Knox County Schools, because if a kid could get over a third of their credits there, it's how much of that is Knox County Schools anymore. So what does it mean? And so I think that was an interesting little subset that I saw on it that I wanted to contribute to this conversation.
Well, and that could be true. And on the flip side, as far as other students in Tennessee go, it would they're all if there's a devaluation, they're all going to be devalued, so everybody's still on the same
fair point.
The same thing, because assuming that systems allow this. Now there's some logistics hurdles involved in this. First of all, you can only be gone for a class period, so essentially an hour a day. This is going to be off campus, so if the program and the program has to provide transportation, the religious instruction program. It's not a school system program.
So as a student who is of age, can they drive to their thing, or does it have to be an outside?
I don't think that students are allowed to drive off campus in Knox County.
Okay.
But I would defer to anyone who has greater knowledge than I. I had a child in Knox County Schools, but it's been years and years and years.
But the rule is on this current item is that the outside program has to handle the transportation,
right?
And so all that stuff's off the school board part of it. The school board doesn't.
Right.
They just have to basically have the right paperwork in place that says this student can leave.
Well. Now the school system does have to. There are a couple of requirements. One is that whoever does the instruction has to be a certified teacher in Tennessee, and the school system does have the responsibility to approve the curriculum. However, they can't do that on religious grounds, they or denominational grounds. In other words, they can't deny most of these are that have been done in the state are Christian programs. They can't deny a possible Jewish program or a Muslim program or a Wiccan program or anything else like that on the grounds of the theology.
Right. You're teaching them something, and we can't really question what you're teaching them. We just have to acknowledge that you're teaching them something.
You've got a teacher doing it, and it's and you're actually teaching something.
Now, is it required to be religious based? Could it like a vocational company?
This is religious based. This is
okay.
This part now, other things, there may be other programs you can do, but this is a religious based program. One of the during the discussion they talked that Campbell County has one that they has been going on for years. That's kind of been thrown out as an option. It's a Christian program. They're located right next to Campbell County High School,
right,
which is the only public high school in Campbell County. So, Knox County. This goes back to the logistical problems. If you are, let's say, if you're a religious organization, religious entity wants to start a program like this, and they want to put it in Bearden. Bearden High School students can get there pretty quickly.
Right.
When
right,
like I said, they only have an hour, so they could get there. Depending on traffic in Bearden can be pretty heavy, but let's say 5 minutes. They get 5 minutes there. 45 minutes of instruction, 5 minutes back. They're 55 minutes away from school. However, for a student at Farragut to get to that program,
right,
would be almost impossible. They'd have to turn around and go back, essentially, and kids from Carter couldn't get there at all. So there may be, if there is at least one religious organization that's been unnamed that's kind of interested in doing this. There's no indication of whether that would be at one location for one school or one location for a couple of schools or satellite locations for multiple schools. I think there are 13 high schools in Knox County. This is where Jesse would come in real handy. Right off the top of his head, he knows.
So is any of the complaint about
like this?
Is any of the complaint from any of the school board about whether or not certain students aren't going to have access to any of this because there's not something local to their school that's going to do it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Or is most of the complaint more around you're taking curriculum away from us and putting it somewhere else? Well,
there's a little bit of that. There's and part of it is there's a lot of discomfort about teaching religion in schools or as part of the public school curriculum, part of the offerings, and this is kind of a quasi part of the curriculum. It's allowed to count as part of the curriculum, even though it's an outside entity doing the educating, and so there's always a little queasiness, I think, in doing that. Reverend John Butler, who is on a school board member, said that this is kind of a slippery slope, because and he talked about other organizations that are there are a lot of religions out there, a lot of and you've got to approve all any of them that come to you, essentially. And he said that it's kind of a slippery slope. He voted for it. Now it passed with only one dissenting vote, and that was Jennifer Owen, and now Catherine Bike wasn't there. She was out of town, so we don't know exactly how she would have voted, but it would have mattered. So they all ended up voting for it, and really the legislature almost gave them, a little bit of leeway, but this is something they basically have to allow.
That credit, I think, could make a big difference to certain students.
It could,
especially like junior, senior year, and maybe you failed a class, and you've got to really knock out these last couple semesters and get all those credits in, and to take out of school for a period of the day and not get the credit may have a bigger impact to that student.
Yeah, I will tell you one thing. When I was in school, if I had been given the option of a elective of an advanced math class or religious instruction, I would take religious instruction every day of the week. As my former math teachers would say, thank goodness. And
well, I mean, it explains why you have that Alabama T-shirt on, and why you're a writer and not a mathematician.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. It's funny. Kind of one of the reasons that I went into journalism is I didn't think I'd have to deal with numbers so much, and then like this week had
all the
had to write a 2,000-word story on nothing but numbers. We'll real quickly we'll go through some other things. The Knox County Planning Commission had their monthly meeting. One of the interesting things they had was it's an after the fact approval of a wedding venue as a special use on farmland, or actually farmland in East Knox County. This was one of these Holston Springs it's a farm and wedding venue. They've converted their barn out there into a very nice looking venue for weddings and other events that people might want to use. One of the problems, and this is something that a lot of people who own land that's zoned agricultural will do, especially moving into agritourism. Corn mazes are a big thing, and these have finally gotten regulated. If you're in Knox County and you have land that's zoned agricultural, and you want to do something that's not farm related, like a corn maze, like a wedding venue, like a sports camp, or whatever it is that you want to do with your property that is non-farm income based thing, you have to get it approved as a special use by the Planning Commission. Well, the Holston Springs folks, owners didn't realize needed to do that. It's been open for a couple of years.
Allegedly, didn't know they didn't need to.
Well,
do it.
I mean,
I agree. It's your barn. You can do what you want in it.
Well, the owner is an attorney, actually a former professional baseball player, but he's an attorney and knows. He needs that if. Yeah, you would think anyway that if he knew about it, right? he would have done it. Yeah, but you get a business license without having a zoning. I mean,
I know that's just
zoning. That's a left hand to right hand thing.
Oh, I know.
And
I played those games.
And anyway, they had to get a special. So they've been operating for a couple of years. Somehow, and I think what prompted this is they talked a little bit. They didn't really talk about it much. A little bit. I think they want to do a little addition onto their barn that they've converted,
right.
And that's probably where it popped up. That hey, this was never approved for a special use. I don't know for sure, but the. And there was never really a whole lot of doubt that they would get it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, okay, well, we'll get you into compliance. And that's what a lot of things like zoning laws are. I mean, it's not if you build an outbuilding into a setback zone, you don't get arrested for it. You really usually don't get fined for it. You have to tear it down. I mean, you can come into compliance. So this would get them into compliance. There was kind of a wrinkle thrown in. One of the rules on these are called event venues, in zoning parlance, and actually they're called rural retreats in zoning parlance in the county code. But you cannot have any activity within 200 feet of the property line unless the neighbor adjacent to that property line signs a waiver. So you have to keep things in this property is actually kind of narrow, so they had a couple of places where they had activities that would be within 200 feet. One was a cabin on one side of the property. It's really close to the road. They had neighbors across the road. It's within 200 feet of the property. On the other side, they had glamping sites, which is another kind of popular thing for farms to do, is have kind of upscale camping locations. They had two glamping tents that are located real close to the property line on the other side. And they have to get approved separately from this one. Although the owner wound up getting a waiver that presented at the meeting, kind of a last minute thing,
right.
For the cabin. The neighbors that are closest to the glamping sites are opposed to the whole thing and are not going to sign a waiver. Or at least they said they would not sign a waiver. So, like for instance, at this venue now that even though it's approved and they can operate legally,
they can't use
the glamping sites where they are now until and unless those neighbors sign a waiver. So there are these kinds of restrictions. If you own farmland, or you know someone who does, and they would like to make a little extra money doing whatever, it doesn't necessarily need to be a wedding venue. It can be, like I said, corn maze or whatever else. A lot of farms are doing classes.
One that happens.
They're doing class. I don't know that hunting. I don't know how hunting is.
Knox County is a little different,
and hunting is also regulated by the state. But these are things like a lot of farms are offering classes, either in agricultural things, or they'll get a chef to come in and do a farm to table thing.
Does pick your own strawberries count?
And no, that's an agricultural
that makes sense,
use. Yeah. That would not count. But if you wanted to give classes on raising strawberries, or a cooking class from a chef giving a cooking class on using strawberries in your for your holiday meal or whatever, that is more. Although that's a little bit easier to get away with than having something like a wedding venue or a corn maze. Those are, anyway, and wedding venues. It's a real popular thing now for farms to do this. So there's several in Knox County. In fact, one of the funny things that kind of happened at this meeting was, as the discussion was going on, one of the planning commissioners, Nancy Barger, popped up and she asked a question about it. She's actually the owner of a wedding venue in West Knox County, had not affected by this. This was a site-specific ruling for these folks. But anyway, one thing that is noted is even though the venue did not have the proper zoning approval to do this, that all weddings that were performed there, have been performed there, are still valid. So it's not can't use that grounds for a annulment or anything like that. So they're still valid, but so everybody's going to be happy and throwing sunflower seeds there for a while. And one other thing that the planning commission started to tackle was one of the things about the missing middle housing that we've talked about. There's a developer who wanted to put in 8 townhouses on a lot in the Oakwood Lincoln Park neighborhood, amid a bunch of single family houses. The neighborhood is that's one of those things where the city's trying to increase density. Developers
on board.
Except the neighborhood, except for the neighbors. And and one of the points that the neighbors pointed out was that density has been encouraged, especially along major corridors. This is on Chickamauga Avenue. It's not a major corridor. It is surrounded by almost exclusively single-family residences. But one of the things in favor of the developer is right next door to this lot, on property owned by the same developer, is a sixplex. It's a 6-unit development. And, of course, it was approved before the zoning changes were called in. The neighborhood basically is saying shouldn't be a precedent. It should be it's a mistake. That's an almost direct quote from one of them. So there's this conundrum the planning commissioners faced with. This is greater density is something that virtually everyone has said is needed in the city of Knoxville in order to accommodate the growing population. Yet, you have, in many cases, very active and involved neighborhood associations that are opposed to anything that can be perceived as reducing the value of single-family homes, which make up the majority of neighborhoods.
Right, which you've talked about on the show before.
Yeah,
generally speaking, doesn't turn out to be true. Usually home values stay pretty solid or go up, especially in our market the way it's been the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, yeah. It's but that is always a fear that is raised.
Right.
And and a reason that's raised. And so, but what ended up happening was they basically punted a month. And but hopefully their hope is that it would give the developer time to meet. The developer and the neighborhood association hadn't really met. I think they met the day before the meeting. They hadn't really met. That's one of the things that planning commissioners have really encouraged in recent years has been, if you're a developer, you want to develop something in an existing neighborhood, or even in an area where it hasn't been developed yet. It's a farm in the county. Talk to the neighbors. Tell them what you ahead of time before you come to us. Talk to the neighbors. Work out any significant issues that might be. Sometimes there are no issues that can't be or that can be resolved. But sometimes there can be, you might agree to put in a wider buffer or landscape buffer between your development and all that. So that's what they're going to be doing the next month. That will be back in front of Planning Commission next month. So we'll follow that. I'm sure we'll be able to report on that in the coming weeks. So. One of the things I also want to do is don't often get a chance to do this, but one of the things about a subscription to Compass, and this is kind of a self-promoting thing, I guess, but we also do a newsletter in addition to our website. Now, when we talk on the podcast, we talk mostly about the longer stories more in-depth stories that we've done during the week. But we also have a daily newsletter. It comes out every weekday in your inbox at 6 a.m. And we cover a lot of other issues. And I just run down some things kind of quickly. Knoxville Area Transit got a $3.5 million grant to do overhead charging for electric buses at the Knoxville Center station. So that's something that came up. Another thing in the city was a $300,000 contract for violence reduction, which has been a hot topic of conversation in city government. We do some kind of more fun stuff in the newsletter. U.S. Rep. Tim Burchett, our congressman, was on Fox this week talking about UFOs disclosing UFO documentation and information in Congress. And we also had a great little thing on hellbenders, the largest salamander there is, and their population is declining and why. And so those are kinds of some of the things that we will drop in on our newsletter, and that's just a little perk of.
I'll jump on board as a subscriber who gets the newsletter, and also the invitation to the colloquy. Like 90% of what keeps me even remotely up to speed are those two things.
Yeah,
conversation in the colloquy, and the newsletter gets me a good brief overview. And if it's a story that I want to know more on, I can follow through and go that way. And so I love it as a daily. It's like I wake up, drink my coffee, and read my newsletter.
Well, thank you a lot.
And the memes, or the little memes or Giphies or whatever they're called on the bottom. Today's was an especially good one for the Friday one with the Mario birthday joke. That was a great one. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do, and we do have a lot of subscribers who like having that, and they can kind of get an idea of what's going on in general in the community through the newsletter. Can read more in depth on issues on our website, and it was and thank you for the segue into our. We also usually try to get a Q&A in our podcast, and it's. What we do is we go to the Compass Colloquy, which is our members only Facebook page.
And don't feel bad if you can't say it. I spent probably a year saying colloquy wrong.
Yeah,
colloquially and all sorts of weird words I came up with.
Colloquy is a strange word to say, and especially there are a lot of words that are strange for me. I'm a Southerner, anyway, or an Appalachian Southerner, anyway. Excuse me. So we always ask our readers on the colloquy what they might want to hear about that isn't in the news regularly. One of the questions that came up was, what kinds of things do people who are experiencing homelessness get arrested for? I think the person who posted that question mentioned, seeing a lot of activity, a lot of things like, carrying open containers and things like that around that people who appear to be homeless, who quite frankly aren't always technically homeless, were engaged in, wanted to know about them what they get arrested for. And didn't do any real research on that, just being a journalist who's covered this issue and covers the city. People who are experiencing homelessness tend to get arrested for the things that they do, not for who they are necessarily, although that can, in worst cases that does play into it. But it's things like public intoxication, sometimes littering, sometimes they rarely get arrested for soliciting when they ask for, although they will be told to move along. They also get rousted out a whole bunch, which is another issue altogether, where they're told they don't get arrested, but they get told to leave. And that's one of the things, like, a lot of times, someone, and this happens whether someone's experiencing homelessness or they happen to be downtown for a night on the town and reveling a little too much, and they have a nice home in a nice neighborhood, but a lot of times if someone is acting out and the officer thinks that they're intoxicated, a lot of times I tell them to move on. A lot of times I tell them to go home, as long as they don't drive. Of course, you can't do that when someone is homeless because they don't have a home, and they typically don't have a car, although some do. Some live in their cars. But sometimes that's what they get arrested for, and usually if they're not complying, they, with whatever the officer says, officers want to arrest them for that. The one thing is that is a felony in the state of Tennessee to camp on public property. That was a very controversial law that was passed session before last. It was actually aimed at protesters who were camping out in the Legislative Plaza in Nashville. But of course, it applies to anyone on any public land anywhere, which means if someone finds a spot under a highway bridge and that is where they are living because they have no means to live anywhere else, they are technically committing a felony. Although, for the most part, that has been ignored. The local police officers, and I know the Knoxville Police Department, in particular, since they deal with a lot more, homeless individuals than the sheriff's office does, for example. Even though the sheriff's office does, a lot of it is, as long as you're not, you need to move along. You don't need to, they prefer, every officer I've ever talked to prefers to try to focus on violent crimes. And crimes that are really dangerous. And it's not that they don't. In fact, with the felony law, Chief Noel as requires anybody to even think about enforcing that has to come through him, and he would be the one making that decision. And so one of the it's one of the things about. It's one of those negative things about experiencing homelessness that makes it such a big social problem. Is a lot of times, if you're homeless, you will invariably commit crimes, not because you want to commit crimes, but because you don't have much of a choice. If you do not have a place to live, you do not have a place to go to the restroom. And as virtually everyone knows, that can lead to an indecent exposure incident, and you could be charged with that. And there are things like so I think that for the most part, police they want problem incidents to end, and they don't necessarily. I think a lot of times arrests are I don't know if it's a last resort, but not the first resort.
I would assume that move along is a lot easier than paperwork for an officer.
Yes. Absolutely.
That is always the preference, is less paperwork.
Yeah. Well, and plus, if you have to arrest somebody, you've got, not only do you have the paperwork, but you've got to spend at least an hour driving out to the jail. or having a transport officer do it, but still it's a lot of, and one of the things that Chief Noel at KPD has said is he really wants to focus on violent crime, and that is that, like I said, that's not to say that there aren't abuses. It's not to say that that officers could make other choices. It's one of those things where the alternative response issue can come into play. It's a very complex issue, but I think for the most part, the question was, what types of offenses do people who are homeless get arrested for? And I think most of them are the
public intox, public indecency, stuff like that.
Yeah, and things that before anybody starts throwing stones, those are the same things that a lot of people get arrested for. Right?
I'll go on
outside of UT football games.
I've got a PI on football Saturday, so it's,
yeah. There are a lot
not
more
the greatest experience, but
there are a lot more people who are publicly intoxicated at UT football games on any given UT home game Saturday than there are homeless people inside the city of Knoxville. Anyway, it's homelessness is one of those it's one of those problems that has been with us for a very, very long time, and it's very difficult to get a handle on, and which is one of the reasons it continues to be an issue, political issue as well, and is one of the main issues in the city election this year. So anyway, I hope that helps answer that question. And
moving on to next week.
Yeah, we can move on to next week. Next week is a little bit slower on the civic front. We do have one of those aforementioned county commission work sessions on Monday, where they will discuss things that will be voted on the following Monday. Other than that, we've got our candidate profiles are going to begin to roll out. They will be coming out over the next few weeks as we finish them up. We don't have the bandwidth to be able to set aside and just only do that and have it all come out in a neat and tidy voter guide. But we will have our candidate profiles. We'll start rolling them out. We'll have should have a couple next week, a couple more the week after that maybe, and then we're hoping to be able to have them all out before early voting begins on August 9th.
So I have a journalist question on that. Is there any particular order that you're planning on doing it in, or is just as soon as you can get everybody sat down, you're just going to do them as you get them?
Whichever interviews we get done first is
there's a perfectly logical way to
there's
go
about with we're a 2-man operation, so when we get all the interviews done for one, we can write it, and it's kind of like with the campaign finance disclosures. There are always some stragglers, so sure. But we are hoping to be able to have all of those done by the beginning of early voting, and we should be able to make that. I just don't want to promise it because, as one candidate told me, they don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Anyway, so that's going to start rolling out. Then at the end of the week, we're going to have we do every month. We're part of a statewide effort called Power Poll, which is various cities and communities across the state will conduct. Journalists will conduct polls for the Power Poll organization. If you're a Power Poll member, you can go to their website and read the stories from other areas, but they're really local specific things. It's not while it's called a Power Poll, it's not a scientific poll. It's a survey of community leaders in business, nonprofits, education, government, those kinds of things. Anyway, and we ask them polling questions every week, and one of the ones every month, excuse me, our poll this week is going to be on city elections, and we have the result. We will have the results on in a story on Friday. So that's another thing that's coming out. So we're going to be heavy on the city election campaign this week. So
keep an eye on your mailboxes. You're going to get plenty of flyers.
Yes,
and plenty of coverage on the actual people who are on those flyers, and what's going on in the Power Poll of what's important. Is that kind of the topics of the question?
A lot of it's going to be predictive. It's just saying, hey, who do you think is going to win? Okay. Not who you support. You think is going to, because a lot of times, a lot of the Power Poll members, these are people, several hundred in the Knoxville and Knox County, who, like I said, they're educators, business executives, business leaders, people in government.
Right, it's a select
people
group.
Who used to be in government, so it's kind of a movers and shakers kind of thing.
It's a select group, not a serious cut of the population. It's just,
it's not. Well, it's not, like I said, it's not a scientific poll, so you can't. If 60% of the Power Poll respondents say one thing, you can't say 60% of the people in Knox County say this.
Right.
It's just these respondents. They self-respond. It's an emailed poll. It's not scientific at all, but I think it does give some insight into kind of what the movers and shakers in the community are thinking.
Right.
And and quite frankly, one of the sometimes they're really in line with what the average person thinks, or the regular polls come out as saying, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they might think one thing, and the general public sentiment goes another way, and but it is interesting because these are people who, these are people who politicians return calls to,
right,
and people who who get things done in the community, and or get things done easier. So it's I think instructive to know kind of what's on their minds. And anyway, so we're going to ask them about the city elections this week and have that report on Friday.
Those are always fun. I like seeing the power polls when they come out.
Yeah, it's not bad for us. And then like I said, if these are tailored for the communities for the most part. We don't. Every now and then there will be a statewide poll. But most of them, almost every month are Knoxville centric. So,
right, Knoxville poll takers. What's the technical word for that person?
These are power poll members, is what they
but
like.
They're people that live here on
people
topics,
that live here. Yes,
on topics that are going on here.
Right.
Yeah, that's I think that's the most important caveat on the.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we like to do it, because that's what our focus is what goes on here. I mean, we report on news that happens in Knoxville and Knox County, and sometimes state news that might be impactful on Knoxville and Knox County. We don't cover, we don't have the bandwidth to cover outlying counties and things like that. So
we're getting there one day.
Well, we might one day, but I mean, if you want news on government in Blount County, if the Maryville City Council and Blount County Commission, we don't have the bandwidth to cover that. So unfortunately, if that's where your focus is, we can't help you out a whole lot. But if you care about what happens in Knoxville, care about what happens in Knox County, CompassKnox.com is a pretty darn good place to go. If
I'm totally biased.
I say so myself.
I'm fully biased, and I think it's the only reason I know anything about what's going on in this town is because I pay for the service you guys provide, because I think it's as good as it gets.
Well, thank you, Seth, for that plug. And we will wrap up this week now. And once again, thanks, Seth, for your help with Barbarian Productions is the company. He does podcasts, and he also does his own podcast, Almost in Agreement, which is kind of, like it says, he often gets people on there who don't, he has guests every week. We don't every week, and he gets guests. They have a lot of times good, robust conversations and talk about what places they are in agreement, and often where they are not in agreement. So that's great. But thanks, Seth, as always, for your help producing Compass Points. We will go forth and report this week and be back again next week. And hopefully Mr. Mayshark will join me, so you won't be have to put up with just my country boy accent the entire time. So thanks a whole bunch, and we'll see you next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost in Agreement. Almost in Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostinagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.